So I used to just not believe in the concept of string-sensitive rackets, something I always used to hear them talk about on those old Tennis Warehouse reviews. But once I really started testing different rackets, different strings, and especially a bunch of different strings in one racket before I actually reviewed it, I really started realizing the right string is make or break. Sometimes it almost feels as extreme as the right setup will have you blasting winners only, and the wrong setup will have you triple faulting on match point. So in today's video, we're gonna discuss how choosing different strings can impact your racket's playability. I'm gonna share with you some of my favorite racket and string combos, and we're gonna do our best to develop a framework for how you can find the best strings for your racket. So rackets have a bunch of different playing characteristics. Like this Gravity Pro doesn't play the same as this Pure Aero. Some rackets are more muted, some rackets are more spin friendly, some rackets are more powerful. It goes on forever. And different string setups can really bring out those qualities, or they can hide them. And because all of our games are so different, some people hit really flat, others hit a lot of spin, some are really aggressive, some are more defensive. You're never gonna find a best string setup for a given racket. It's not like you go, yeah, Alu Power is the objective best setup for this VCORE 95. That's not how it works. It's more about finding the best setup for you, your game, your racket, how your racket is set up, and all that. At the end of the day, it's up to you to decide which characteristics you want to exaggerate, which characteristics you want to reduce, and which ones you're fine with just ignoring. So to illustrate this point, here are 3 of my favorite racket and string setups featuring some of the more popular rackets on the market. And because I'm affiliated with a couple different string companies, as part of my recommendations, I want to provide couple strings that I'm not affiliated with, so you don't feel trapped into using the links in the description. What may be considered the best racket in the world is Pure Aero 98. Basically because of how well it performs on court, but I really think that the right string setup can make this thing play even better. Looking at the Pure Aero 98, here are the characteristics which I would believe are desirable, especially for my game, so these are the ones that I want to enhance. This B-roll shot is brought to you by Direct Tennis, my favorite app for connecting you with local stringers in your area. We've all had those horrible experiences where we think we're about to get the perfect setup for our Pure Aero 98, and then it's ruined by a terrible string job. Avoid that and get yourself connected with really passionate solo entrepreneurs or serious pro stop stores that aren't just guys making minimum wage trying to string a racket as fast as you can like you would at a big box store. The people on Direct Tennis are passionate about their craft, and you can find a better string job through Direct Tennis today. Use our links in the description, download the iOS app today, or check out their website, Direct Tennis. Thanks so much for sponsoring today's video. Spin. Regardless of your stroke mechanics, the Aero 98 boosts spin production on every single shot. Control. Because of that spin, the harder you hit, the more spin you can find, so you can really trust the frame to bring balls back down into the court. Forgiveness. I think this is the most special thing about the Aero 98. It's a masterclass in torsional stability, so you don't get this kind of wobbling leading to an edge-to-edge sweet spot. And the characteristics that I don't like about this Aero 98, so ones I want to reduce or hide, are the comfort or lack thereof. I found that stiffer strings in this frame kind of aggravate my wrist. I feel it the next day, and I don't want to risk any injuries from overuse, which we've actually seen Carlos, and so he's switched from RPM Blast to RPM Team to soften things up. The other thing is the lack of precision. The 1620 pattern on this frame is pretty open, so going to something too powerful or too spring friendly risks losing control, introducing some launchiness, some inconsistencies. And then the things that I just don't really care about for this racket are the muted feel. I do wish there was something more I could do to bring it out, but this racket, the dampening tech works so well. Even going to something super crisp like Lynx Tour or Silver 7 Tour doesn't really add that much ball connection to my shot, and they were just a bit uncomfortable for me. So instead, we're just gonna not pick anything that would be considered overly muted. So as you can see, after trying a bunch of different string setups, my favorite one in this one has been Tourmaline Toro, one of my favorite string releases of the year. The feel isn't overly muted, though I wouldn't exactly call it a super connected string. Toro is quite soft, which is great for taking that edge off in terms of stiffness. I don't have any comfort issues here, even when strung a little bit higher at 53, 54 pounds. I do think the feel here is just crisp enough to give you enough feedback for every shot so you can improve your positioning if you made a mistake. Unlike my experience with Tourmaline Wasabi, which I think as a package, even though it plays really well in this frame, is a bit too muted for what I'm looking for. Toro is just crisp enough, just responsive enough to help you adapt on the fly, learn and play better for the next shot. There's enough ball feedback here to make those kinds of adjustments. Beyond that, I really like how the softness retains this expansive sweet spot, so you still get this edge-to-edge coverage in terms of performance that I think you kind of lose when you go to something a little bit too stiff, like the Silver 7 Tour, like an RPM Blast. And much like this pure Aero 98, the harder you rip the ball with Tourmaline Toro, the better it plays. You get more spin, more power, even more directional control. And my honorable mention for this one is going to be RPM Rough. I think you do get better directional control with RPM Rough compared to Toro, but you do sacrifice durability. As with all rough strings, RPM Rough notches quite quickly, so depending on how tough you are on strings, you might lose playability quite fast. The rough texture of the cross string kind of saws into the main string, which creates notching, which reduces spin and reduces your overall string bed consistency. This is something you can alleviate by going to a smooth round cross. If you like a firmer feel, Hyper G round is something I enjoy. I also am a big fan of Restring Sync. Or if you like a softer feel, you could go to like a Poly Tour Pro, which you could color match both with the neon yellow, or a Ghost Wire really softens things up. We have the VCORE 95, and it's personally my favorite Yonex on the market right now. The precision you get from this 95 square inch head, the 16 by 20 pattern, combines perfectly with how whippy the frame is and the spin-friendly design. I think the package is one of the most creative packages from a playability standpoint that you can find on any frame today. The hitting feel is quite plush, but it's super solid. You don't get this tons of bending feeling with the hoop, which is something that I find when rackets are too soft and too plush. The right string really enhances this raw kind of graphite feel that I think you can find with these VCOREs, but the wrong string, ironically even something like Tourmaline Toro, turns the VCORE 95 into a mush fest. It's way too soft, way too muted, and it brings out that kind of bending sensation. So for the VCORE 95, here's what I want to enhance. This raw graphite feel, a cannon-like hitting noise, which is another thing I love about this frame, the access to spin through a good bit of ball bite and ball grab, and I want to boost the power on center. The things I want to retain, which I don't necessarily need to increase it, but I don't want to lose any, would be the precision that you get from a 95 square inch racket like this, and I want to reduce the lack of forgiveness outside the sweet spot, which there is some, especially compared to some of the 98s we might be looking at, and generally these frames can be a bit muted, which I don't like. So my favorite string setup with these has definitely been Slinko Confidential. In this case, I'm actually using Confidential 16 and Tourmaline Wasabi X in the cross. Confidential really brings out this cannon-like hitting sound with the VCORE 95, which is honestly one of my favorite things about this frame. It's super loud on central contact. The shape profile of Confidential gives you that ball grab that I really like when I'm using spin frames. The playability of this string is also so consistent, offering excellent durability and tension maintenance in the long run. The hitting feel is so solid. It's in between something that might be too muted like a Poly Tour Pro or a Hyper G Soft and something too raw or pingy like a Tour Bite. And Wasabi X adds even more dwell time. I would definitely think a full bed of Wasabi is too soft for this, but just using it in the cross opens up a little extra power on center, forgiveness off center, gives you more dwell time. You hold that ball on the strings for a little longer. I would love to give you a recommendation outside of Wasabi X for the cross string, but I haven't really tried anything quite like it. If you want to mimic this setup, I think I would probably just recommend going for a full bed of Confidential and dropping the tension a little bit. The other one I've been loving is the Gravity Pro, which I think is an absolutely legendary frame, especially because of its use on tour. I think the Gravity Pro might be the greatest racket of the last decade. This one here is a 360 Plus version, but I think this recommendation would work perfectly in the Auxetic 1.0 update and maybe even the 2.0, which is supposed to be incoming next year. So on the Gravity Pro, here's what I love. The deep ball pocketing from this like really raw graphite feel, and obviously the directional control is some of the best, especially when we're talking 100 square inch rackets. Out of this frame, I do wish I could get more power, more spin, and a little bit easier lift. This 1820 is a little out of my comfort zone, but I still love this frame. In this one, I've got TruePro Pure Rush 1.28 in the mains and Restring Sync in the crosses. Pure Rush is nicely crisp, nicely lively, and super consistent and controlled. It sort of wakes up the Gravity Pro, whereas like more muted or dead strings like RPM Blast make the whole experience a bit too dull in my opinion. The Restring Sync adds to that crispness, so it's kind of like an Alu Power-esque feel, but it really opens up spin. That was something I didn't love in a full bed of Pure Rush. There wasn't quite enough arc on the ball. Like the edge would lift things, but it wouldn't always bring it back down, not enough snapback. Restring Sync brings that snapback to the party and helps with feel. If you want to soften things up even more and really get a super deep ball pocketing, I would highly, highly recommend going for Ghostwire and the crosses as well. Again, I have not found a really good substitute for Restring Sync when it comes to how slippery this string actually is. It works so well for a cross. Nor have I found a replacement for Ghostwire, especially at the price. Ghostwire is so amazing. Usually these really soft strings like Wasabi X or Enzo Pro from Tourline are also pretty muted. If you don't like that muted feel, but you still want something soft and really good for ball pocketing, Ghostwire is the way to go. I've even used it in a full bed in a couple frames, and I don't think you lose too much control. And the price is great, so you can restring more often.
Oh, that was dumb.
However, if you do want some alternatives to this Pure Rush, I would look at Miami Tour Hex. That's a good one, feels very similar, has this lively, crisper feel, but it's not the same kind of crispness that you'd get from like a silver Alu-based string. Lynx Tour would work as well, but does play a bit stiffer, a little bit crisper than this one, not quite as lively, and of course I'm a huge fan of Grapple Snake Alpha. Again, nice, lively, pretty comfortable, not being too harsh, and the tension maintenance on all of these strings is absolutely excellent. So my honorable mentions, I do want to talk about the rackets that I have the most experience playing with, especially over the last year, which would be my Slinko Whiteout 18x20, and then of course my Pure Aero RA5. I counted, and of the setups that I can remember, I've tried over 40 in this 18x20 Whiteout. And of all of those, the standout for me, for my game, is easily Grapple Snake Tour M8. Compared to my previous favorite, which was Grapple Snake Tour Sniper, M8 opens up a lot of forgiveness in this whiteout. I find that the whiteout is definitely one of the most string-sensitive rackets I've ever tried, but something too stiff or low-powered really, really shrinks the sweet spot. M8 gives you almost an edge-to-edge sweet spot, similar to the Aero 98, which I think you really need for the Slinko Whiteout to play its best. The durability is superb, offering plenty of playability throughout a tournament if you're gonna play a bunch of matches in a row. And I always felt fully connected to every shot, great feel, without being too jarring or stiff, which is another criticism some people have with this frame. I'm a little bit less experienced with my Racquet, still pretty new to me, but I have tried 13 setups now, and this is the best setup for me so far. This is Tourline Otoro in the mains and Restring Sync in the crosses. And for me, I hit it back to back with Tour M8. This is better. Compared to a full bed of Otoro, Sync takes out a lot of the mushiness that you can find with some of these Tourline strings. I get better control and better feel while retaining the epic spin of Otoro. The extra spin I get with this setup is why I prefer it to M8, since these two setups actually, the hitting feel between them in these Rafas is super close. I did hit them back to back, but I think, you know, the edge with the spin just adds a little bit maybe 1 or 2 extra points a match goes a long way. So what about you? What can you do to find the best string setup for your game? Well, it's not easy if you don't have the luxury to try a new string every week. That's something I have and I'm extremely grateful for, but I think the most important thing is really understanding your starting point. For example, consider 2 different players. Player A has only ever tried Alu Power and player B has only ever tried Tourmaline Wasabi. When these 2 players try Hyper G, they're going to have completely different experiences. The Alu Power guy is going to find Hyper G muted and launchy. And the Wasabi guy is probably going to find Hyper G a bit too stiff and uncomfortable. I think the best thing you can do is really try the mainstays. Try things that are pretty different from each other to start. Like Alu Power, Hyper G, Polytour Pro, and RPM Blast all offer unique experiences. But then the other thing you can try is go for like pretty extreme feeling strings so you can really obviously feel the difference. Grapple Snake Game Changer is super sharp. You can really feel the edges of the string bite into the ball compared to Tourmaline Wasabi, which you get this really amazing snapback and sliding sensation of the strings on each other, which lead to an overall more muted and very soft, comfortable feel. Then you could also try something like Rattlesnake Paradox Pro, which is the most connected feeling string I've ever tried. There's so much friction in the string bed and the directional control is absolutely outstanding. The key to all of this is really self-reflection. I think you need to know what you like about your setup, what you dislike about your setup, and what you don't even care about. I bet right now you can think of 3 things that you love about the string you use and 3 things that you wish were better. And if you want some help from me personally, I always try to reply to the comments that ask questions. I try to reply to every DM or comment I get on Instagram. But if you really want to go in depth with me about the best string or racket for your game, I offer consultations on the website TennCom.media. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.